Looks good.
I think I
Okay,
did this right.
yes, it sounds like we're underway. So I'm going to call to order the Common Council Ordinance Committee regular meeting. It's March 21st and
Hold on
it
one
is-
second, Lisa. It's still going live. Hold on.
Okay,
We'll just have to start over again real quick. I'll let you know when it's ready.
good deal.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'm calling to order the Common Council Ordinance Committee regular meeting. It's March 21st, 2023. It is now 7:02 and I see on the call Josh Goldstein, Tom Livingston, David Hoovelman, Ed Camacho, Lisa Shanahan. These are the people who are here today. We have a quorum. So the roll call's done. Our first matter is a public hearing on Chapter 55, which is our demolition delay ordinance. And I don't know, Brian, if we have anybody who is here, wants to raise their hand to make any comment upon that, other than Mr. Bryant, who's here.
We have Dana Laird is an attendee.
Okay,
Her hand is not raised. Todd's is raised. So Todd, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, of course, I am in enthusiastic support of this ordinance. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get 180 days, but everything else in it is so much better than what we had before that it's worth it to stick with the 120 for the moment. And this, and I really appreciate all the time and effort that all of you put into this, all the thought and consideration and everything else. I think it's worthwhile. I think what we have here is a vastly better ordinance. And like I say, I'm a little disappointed about not going up to the statutory limit of 180, or state statutory limit of 180 days, but everything else is great.
thank you, Mr. Bryan. Thank you for your hard work on this too. I know that you and Mr. Livingston have spent what I can only say is countless hours crafting this ordinance, and really appreciate your efforts, Mr. Livingston's efforts, and the rest of the historical commissions.
Lisa, Dana has raised her hand, so I'm going to allow her to talk. And thank you to Todd and Dana for coming to the public hearing today.
Thanks again.
Dana, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, pretty much what Todd said, and I'm just hoping this gives us a little more weight when we bring up. This is just kind of a never-ending story for us, things that are being demolished, and that we can have a little more oomph to our what little power we have in the historical commission. But I'm actually a member of the public now, aren't I? So I do like to see Norwalk's history paid more attention to and respected. So, and thanks for all your work. That's it.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you so much. Anybody else with their hand raised for the public hearing portion of the meeting?
No, there's nobody else.
Okay, so I'm going to close public hearing right now and open the discussion with our committee members about the demolition delay ordinance. I can only say we have spent hours discussing this. I'm not sure if there's any life left in the horse to beat anymore, but if there's anything that anybody else would like to say about this ordinance, Mr. Livingston, I'll give you a chance to summarize what we should think about before we vote.
Sorry, I can summarize the changes or not. If people want me to, I'm glad to. I just wanted to mention that I did speak with Bill Ireland earlier today. He was not able to make it tonight, but he is in support of this proposed amendment to the ordinance. And again, if anybody wants me to go through the changes from the existing ordinance, I'm happy to do it. But as Lisa pointed out, we've been through this somewhat ad nauseum. I do have a couple of nits, but I'll get to those in a second.
So anybody with questions or concerns or would like to have an in detail review?
No, I do have just a couple, like, I'm not sure what you call them, Tom, nits or whatever, but I do have a couple of those too. But that's about it.
Okay,
right,
good. Well, I'll open the conversation for nits. Who wants to go first?
Well,
You
I'll
wanna
go first with the
Which one
two
is
I
gonna get-
have, which were one on section 55-8. There's some brackets that are left into this. I removed those in the bottom. Brian, you know what, see those?
Right by the 30,000.
Yeah, and at the end of the paragraph, there's another bracket.
Yep.
And then on 55-8 I guess it's the last paragraph. It says, when we added the word about extending for more than additional 6 months, it should be an additional 6 months.
Unless extended by the city, in which case such permit shall not be extended for
More than an additional, out of the
an
word.
additional 6 months. Got it.
Yeah, that's all I had. I don't know what Ed has.
Tom, is that supposed to be D?
No.
Yeah, but with this, the Microsoft, numbering, I assume it's D, right, Brian?
Well,
We
it just
can-
says B with a cross out, so I assume it's supposed to
Yeah,
be.
Yeah.
But it's the way Microsoft, I hate Microsoft.
Here, we could do it right now.
We are, all right.
It's D, you're right. It should be D.
Hold on.
I bet when you accept the changes, it'll become D, but it's make it D to be sure. You're right. Absolutely, Josh.
Good catch. Once that's done, Ed, we'll have you go, just so that as soon as you're caught up, Brian, just let us know.
Yep. Hold on.
This is the
Brian,
tedious
okay, go
part of
ahead.
our meeting.
Go ahead, Ed.
Okay, at 55, and these are somewhat small, the next one's a little bit bigger, but at 55.5 E, where it says, the underlying portion, well, but basically, in the case of a request by an applicant, such hearing shall be held within 21 days after the date of such request. If the Norwalk Historical Commission determines, and I propose adding at the end of that, a hearing in no event later than 10 days thereafter, that the building structure or part thereof, et cetera. It seems to leave it open-ended, like the commission can not decide, even though a hearing is held. And I assume that reasonableness, like a reasonable time, is presumed. But since this is a statute, I don't think we want to leave it to the courts to determine what a reasonable time is.
So you want to add in, if the historical commission determines,
At the conclusion of such hearing, or and in no event later than in no event later than 10 days thereafter, or something like that, that the building structure or part thereof.
Okay.
So in other words,
yeah, I got, that makes sense.
Window.
So let's say the Norwalk Historical Commission determines at such hearing, and when you say, and in any
But
event.
no later than,
Yeah,
Yeah, at the end of such hearing, and in no event later than 10 days thereafter, or something like that.
yeah, okay, and in no event later than 10 days thereafter. Blah, blah, blah.
And I guess, yeah, and I suppose the court, it presupposes that if no decision is made within 10 days, then it's
Well, then they haven't complied.
and
Right.
yeah.
All right. So let me read this to you, and you guys can make any final nits on that. If the Norwalk Historical Commission determines at the end of such hearing, and then what was the next part of
I
it?
think you just say at such hearing, because it may not.
At such hearing?
Yeah.
Okay. If
And in no
determines-
event, later
Later
than
than-
10 days.
Thereafter.
thereafter. All right, let me read it one more time. If the Norwalk Historical Commission determines at such hearing and in no event later than 10 days thereafter, and then the rest of it is the same.
Yeah, I would put a comma before the and a comma after the thereafter.
yes, I agree.
Okay.
And
Got it.
so this one may be,
That's great.
yeah, this one may be a little bit more, perhaps controversial, but 58A, I'm sorry, 58.8A.
8A.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's the fine provision, right?
Yep.
So
Yes.
the fine is the lesser of $30,000 or 10% of the assessed
Assessed
value
value.
of the building. Yeah. So is this, if the building in question that was torn down without compliance is in fact determined to be historic or basically have to, historical significance, or is any building that's torn down not in compliance with the statute, subject to that owner's fine?
I mean, my reading is any violation of this chapter, which includes if you don't follow the rules to get your permit, which is the thing that Bill Ireland was so concerned about.
Right.
That's the
But
first sentence, right, of this section?
Yeah, but so if you do that without a permit, or without complying with the section, and it's a shack that wouldn't be historic, wouldn't be historic or have any historical or architectural significance in any way, but that person would still have to pay this fine. Shouldn't this be in the event that shouldn't the fine be in that case lesser, like a lesser fine, as opposed to a fine of this magnitude for property that in the final analysis never really was historic in any event?
But again, this covers more than just historic properties, right?
Yeah, it covers.
And it says the lesser of, so the lesser of the 30,000 or the 10% of the assessed value. So if it's a shack and it's worth $1,000.
The house is 20,000, is $200,000 or $250,000, which would be a shack at this point.
Yeah.
That's $25,000 for a property that didn't conform. And once it's torn down, it's torn down. You can't do anything about it.
Right.
You can't reconstruct it. And that is a huge fine for property that was not really designed to, that this ordinance was not. I mean, the purpose of this ordinance is to really, to preserve as much as anything. And the language of the statute or of the ordinance is designed to apply to any property. But the purpose of the ordinance is designed to apply to preserve historical properties in the city of Norwalk. And so that's why that fine is quite significant, because we place a paramount on preserving historical properties. But if the property is just a run-of-the-mill house and the person just didn't know and they just tore it down, there should be a fine because there was no compliance. And the fine probably should be significant because we don't want, we want to encourage compliance. But a fine of that size for property that was never, that has no historical significance, is only 50 years old, and that's it. That's a huge fine to impose on someone for what probably in most cases would be a mistake.
Mr. Hooverman, do you want to speak to that? Is that why your hand's up?
Yeah, I can respond to it too, but let David go first.
Well, I have a question, just so I'm understanding this. Somebody wants to get a permit to tear down a property that's over 50 years old. That triggers this. They're not going to get the permit until this process is finished.
So what if they apply for a
So if they go and tear it down and
Right.
they didn't have a permit,
Right.
there's a whole different mechanism that's in order, because you can't tear down a piece of property without the permit and a permitted
Right.
company to do the work. So that's an additional set of fines. So you're talking about somebody that the process started and they said, screw it, I'm going to tear down my property.
Right.
Right.
So in other words, so what's the other set of fines for someone like that?
Well, and I see.
I don't know. We'd have to, I'd
It's
have to
not
look.
50 years old.
Tom, do you want, Tom,
Let
you
me-
looked
let me
at
kind of-
this in
because-
some kind of depth.
Yeah, because I think we want to get away from the idea that this applies to just demolition of historic properties, right? One of the things that Bill Ireland was really concerned about was it was in Willow Street, the demolition was done without a permit. And there are all sorts of, it was a public hazard. There were wires all over the place. There was oil tank, I think it was propane tank, whatever it was. And it was a true hazard to the public. So I have no sympathy for somebody who does that. And they should be fined. And if it's, it's the
I
lesser
agree.
of, Lisa pointed out, and I don't think, I can't sit here and tell you what that fine should be, but I don't, if somebody's creating a public hazard because they don't follow the process,
And
Well,
they
but
could
David
blow up
said
the
there-
neighborhood. And it's 10%
David
of the assessed value, not the fair market value.
Yeah, I understand. So what 250, a house for 250 would be, maybe once, like 60% of that or whatever the assessed value would be. But
right, 70% of that stuff then.
I think it's 70%. But what is what are the fines for if someone does that, just tears down a house that does not, that's, 40 years old? So in other words, it wouldn't even have to comply with this, but tears down a house without a permit. What's the fine for that?
When you say wouldn't have to comply with this, they have to get the demolition permit, right?
Right, but if
But
someone
it's 10 years old, 100 years old, or 50 years old.
or 40 years old, but if someone does not apply, because David said that there's a whole set of fines for that. What are the fines for that?
I don't know. We'd have to go and look that up.
Okay.
And
I think
doesn't that imply then state violations?
Well, there are issues, and I don't know if maybe we should get Darren on and talk about the issues they found when they were trying to impose a fine on the owners of that building who didn't follow the process. There's an exception on the state, but so this is to cover that, to fill in the hole that wasn't covered by the state.
It was Jeff, not Darren.
Oh, Jeff, okay.
But this ordinance we were talking about this ordinance well before the Willow Street thing, right? You guys have been talking about this for a long time now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
it had been talked about before.
Yeah, so Willow Street is just like an example of one example in the last 140 demolitions where there was no permit. But so there should be a substantial fine, but it seems to me that this huge fine is designed is that size in large measure because we've been talking about this ordinance, or at least for as long as I've been on this committee, we've been talking about this ordinance in connection with historic properties. That's the important, that's really the overarching thing. And in fact, in the definitions we have, historic this, what's an historic property, what's it, two of the three requirements. One of them is that the property be 50 years or older, but then the other two requirements have to do with the historic nature of the property. So if the property would not otherwise fall into any of those categories, do we still want to impose a fine of that size, that heft, on property that because they didn't comply? Well, I'm assuming that fine applies to any demolition, whether or not it's 50 years, the property is 50 years or older. Is that right?
Right.
So
I know Josh has his hand up, but just one last thing, which is one of the reasons the fine is high is because real estate value, like a contractor, it's just the cost of doing business, right? If you put in $500, hey, I'll tear down the house, I'll violate the rules, but it's $500. It has to be meaningful in my mind.
Especially with the dangers that Mr. Ireland was worried about with having open tanks and wires and things like that. Josh, you've had your hand up for a little while, and then we can go back to Mr. Livingston and Mr. Camacho if we want to continue that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way I read it was more in line with what Lisa and Tom were saying, insofar as if the policy is we do not want people demolishing their homes without permits. There has to be a meaningful deterrent and penalty for having done that. This provides, to the extent we can, which frankly, there is a state issue on, our hands are sort of tied, as I understand it, into how the extent of the fine we can impose. But one of the things that we can do is provide a significant deterrent for people to do what happened on Willow Street. So I guess my feeling was whether his home was historic or not wasn't a factor, because the underlying issue, I thought, as Bill Ireland talked about, was this public health, public hazard issue, which is the thing we actually really need to get in front of.
I think
More
that's
like
why
at this
he feels
point
that
react to.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that comment, because I think what he was saying, what Bill was saying, was that he views this ordinance as a cleanup of, some of the important factors already going on, that, this is a significant improvement of where things stood before.
Right.
As far as the safety.
I think that's, I'm sorry.
Jessica's got her hand up, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say something along the lines of that. I think that part of what Bill Ireland was worried about with the homeowner doing the demolition and the safety aspect is corrected for in the ordinance, where it's now required that a licensed contractor must do the demolition, because at Willow, we're having the homeowner, the property owner, someone who's not certified or licensed do the demolition, which is why I think those safety concerns came up. So I think that part is being addressed somewhere else in the ordinance.
But what we're trying to do is when people violate the ordinance, we want to have a significant penalty so that they won't. So they don't say, you know, for $10,000, I'll take it down.
Right. I just
What is
think
the
those both of those topics were being conflated in that discussion, I think. So I just wanted to clarify about the certified or licensed contractor doing the demolition.
Thank you.
So if the certified contractor does the demolition without, I mean, it's hard to believe that they would do something without a permit, is the homeowner still on the hook, right? Not the contractor.
Correct. Correct. Because the homeowner is the person who would be responsible for the permit.
But I think Bill Ireland would tell you that the contractor would never do it in the state of Connecticut because they never did any more work.
Right.
But
Okay,
anyway,
I just think that's
They'd
a
probably lose their license.
property.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, all right,
Do
that's.
we need
that was my-
further discussion on this? Ed, do you have other nits and nats or do you?
No, no,
That's
that's
it?
so I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, please.
I'd like to make a motion that this proposed demolition delay ordinance as amended with the nits I gave and the first one that Ed gave be approved and moved to the common council for approval.
He'd like to demolish discussion and move to a vote.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh.
Yes.
Finally.
All in favor? 5. All right. None's in opposition, so it will move to common council at our next common council meeting. Great. So now we're gonna open up regular public
Thanks, Tom.
comment. Thank you, Mr. Livingston. That was a heavy lift, no doubt about it. We appreciate all of your efforts. And I think that we're happy that we're gonna have a better ordinance than what we had before. I appreciate that. Now we'll close that discussion. We'll open up public comment. Brian, if there's anybody in the audience.
The only person in attendance is Dana, and her hand is not up.
I think she might be clapping behind us, so that's good. All right, so the next order of business is acceptance of our minutes for the February 21st meeting. Do I have a motion? And then I'll take any corrections. Thank you, Mr. Hooverman. Any corrections? Mr. Livingston, I see your hand up. And you're muted, by the way.
It's a problem.
Oh, you're still muted.
Still muted, Tom.
He double clicked.
Sorry, I lost my screen with when you put that up. Okay, yeah, it's on page 5 in discussion of Oak Hills. And actually says exactly the opposite of what I said.
Hate it when
so-
that happens.
Yeah, so it should read, Mr. Livingston explained that this amendment is to put the Director of Recreation and Parks on the Oak Hills Park Authority, period. It wasn't putting Oak Hills under the authority of the Parks Commission, whatever that is.
Hold on. Mr.
Yeah.
Livingston explained that this amendment is to put the,
Director of Recreation and Parks on the Oak Hills Park Authority, and to delete the rest of that sentence.
Okay, I have just a couple little nits unless anybody else has anything.
Well, actually, it's
Oh.
fine. It's Oak Hills Park. Well, you can do it that way. It's Oak Hills Park Authority is the technical name, but either way, it doesn't matter.
I got it.
I just need to correct some of the names of the speakers that I happen to know, and then one little tiny thing. So in the second paragraph under public hearing, no, it's the first paragraph under public hearing. Priscilla Farrell is F-E-R-A-L. That's it. And then the next one, if you go to the next page, Mary Verrill is V-E-R-E-L. And because we've had Mr. Brian here so many times, I'd like to spell his name correctly too.
V-E-R-E-L.
That's it. And Todd Bryant just has 1 D in his name. I knew he'd be here, so I'd be embarrassed if we spelled his name wrong. And then under discussion of leaf blower ordinance in the first paragraph, the third line, it says, here you go. They had spoken to some members of the city government. Okay, that's it. Okay, any other changes from anybody else? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes as amended? That's 5 of us. Great. Okay, next order of business is discuss and vote on, but we're not maybe going to vote, the Arts and Cultural District proposal. Tom and I, with the help of Jessica and Sabrina, took another turn of the ordinance for the Arts and Cultural District. Some of you know, thank you, Josh, and thank you. Maybe it was David who sent me some stuff too. We're still working on the account about how the account for the Arts and Cultural Commission will work. We just have to really think a little harder about what types of monies we're going to be accepting by the Arts Commission. Obviously, they're going to be doing maybe some grant acceptance. That's going to be more like trees than what we would be doing with cannabis. So we're going to be thinking that through a little bit. With cannabis, we have restricted things that we can spend it on, and we wanted to have a process so that a committee would go at it. But we think more for arts and cultural, we're probably just going to be getting grants that are pretty restricted. So while we have you, Jessica and Sabrina, any thoughts about that before we take another turn at the draft about, what types of monies would be coming into this account so we can craft it properly?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of key ones. So grants is definitely one of the first ones, but the second one is going to be private donations.
So you can get private donations. Okay.
Correct.
But
So that's
donations,
something,
yeah.
That's just something we've never been able to accept before. So it's going to be something new that we can put in there. And we also have to flag that the funding can only be used for the specific Arts and Cultural District geography. So although the Arts and Cultural Commission is going to be citywide and focused on that geography, the funding itself can only be used in that geography.
Gotcha. And so when people give private donations, do you feel like it's going to be like grants where there's going to be restrictions, like they're going to say, we're going to pay for this sign or this project or this whatever? Or do you think people are going to be like, here's some money?
I think it's going to be kind of twofold. So we've gotten requests in the past to just donate generally to the arts in Norwalk, but also if we're actively soliciting folks to donate to something, we definitely have like a clear cut exactly what we want asked from them. So that would be something where it's like, okay, we need $20,000 to do a film festival in Norwalk. We need, X amount, here's how you can sponsor it type of deal. So I think it'll be a mix of the two for the most part.
Sponsorships, grants, and maybe some general things. So that puts us in the world of trying to get some kind of process for how the general funds would be spent. So we would probably take it to the planning, what I used to call the planning committee, ECD committee now.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good. That's helpful because we were struggling with that a little bit. Mr. Hooverman, do you have a question?
I'm a little confused about something. So the grant, this accepting of grants, what if it's like we got into the issue of a piece of art that someone is donating through that's worth value? Does it have to be placed within the cultural district because this is going to be the arm that it's accepted through? Is that how does something like that work?
No. So whenever we generally accept any type of donation, like a statue, the Arts and Cultural Commission is going to function just like the Arts Commission is. So it oversees the whole city. And normally what happens is somebody will approach us with a piece that they want to donate. They'll have a suggested location, but it's really up to the Parks and Rec Committee or wherever that specific location is, if they're really going to accept that piece and where to place that piece. So it wouldn't have to be specifically in the district.
But now that's a piece of art, but that's a piece of property. Money is property. How do you distinguish that can only be utilized within the cultural district, or how is it utilized within the city as a whole if the commission represents the cultural district and the city as a whole?
I don't think
someone's making a donation of money to the city. Are they making it through the the cultural commission? Then it has to go to the cultural district in order for us to maintain this distinction.
Right. There are two processes, I think, that we're talking. There are two processes we're talking about, and then distinctions within those processes. So right now, someone can donate art, like the ballerina girl, for example, and the Arts Commission can determine where that specific geography is. However, I think if someone is to make a donation and ask us to consider putting it in a certain district, in the certain location and geography, that would fall under that arts and cultural district. We could do it under both. We could do it citywide, like we did the Ballerina Girl, or we could accept it through the arts and cultural district donation. But I think that the main function for the grant is, or that specific account, is to do fundraising and sponsorship. For example, if we were to do a holiday celebration and it's located in the district, then we have the ability to then accept private donations and fundraising for that specific event. So if we were to host a series of events that fall within the district, within that geography, then that's what gives us the ability to collect the private dollars through that particular account. So one, I think
that's
is
got to be, I think that we've got to be very careful on the language then that goes into this, so that it's very clear that there's a duality of purpose here, and the way the money is dispersed or distributed once it comes in. It's the first time we're doing this through any sort of board and commission. And I think we've got to be very clear, because you've got a commission that serves two functions. It serves the cultural district and it serves the city as a whole. And
Yes.
so we've got to be very clear that the language within this of how that money is A, that we can go get the money, B, how the money comes into the city and is dispersed out at that point. And
Right.
that's what
And
I'm concerned
Exactly.
about.
And then I think there's even a nuance in addition to that, which is property, right? Pieces of art versus actual financial funding or dollar funding, monetary funding. So those two, I think, need to be treated differently as well. It's almost a matrix, right? It's almost a matrix. The columns are, within the district and city, and the rows are pieces of property such as sculptures or pieces of artwork, and the other would be dollars, monetary donations and sponsorships. And sort of of course my brain works in tables, but like, how does each one of those quadrants work?
Gotcha.
Yeah, I agree. I just think we have to make sure that we're very clear that how the commission itself functions within the structure of doing that, so that there's no question that they have the ability to do both things, because they're serving a dual purpose at that point. And that's my concern.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to craft. Already getting some thoughts on that. Mr. Livingston, do you have a thought? You're muted again.
I'm normally better about that. To follow up on David's stuff. So just drill down a little more. So we could not accept money in this for, say, something out of the district, right?
Correct.
Just wants to make a grant to the city to put in something over in, I don't know, some other park. We couldn't take the money.
Wait,
Correct.
can we
Not through
not
this-
take a grant? We could take a grant, but we just can't take on,
No, but only if it's the grants used in this district, right?
Right,
Correct.
Okay.
say we're Cranberry.
so
Right,
there's
so
no
art.
grant, but the city gets other art grants, so that any grant that the city might get for arts won't be managed by this
Correct. It
commission.
wouldn't go specifically in that account. So we get grants now as the city for arts, but the Arts Commission specifically does not get grants.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
when that happens, we have the ability to put the grant money elsewhere. That's not specifically in this district, but if the Arts and Cultural Commission is specifically getting grants, they would have to specifically go for the district itself. But as the Arts Commission, the Arts and Cultural Commission, the city can apply on behalf if there was something that's a larger initiative that we would be applying for.
So that I guess underlying that is this assumption that by having this, we'll be able to attract more money, right?
Correct. Also, there's the opportunity for the city to apply separately for a grant than the commission itself as well.
Okay.
So
And
that's the main benefit, right? That's one of the main benefits of the Arts and Cultural District, the ability to pull in private dollars.
right. So the next question is in administration. So when you get a grant for the district, how do you guys envision it being approved? Let's say it's cash dollars. Do you envision it being the commission itself approves it? Or does it go to some sort of committee in the council or like like?
It would need to go through ECD and then council.
So you
Or
anticipate,
there's also Parks and Rec and Cultural Affairs, which is what kind of the Arts Commission stuff has been going through at this point. But yes, it would have to go through with our charter in place as well. We would have to do that to get a signature on any of the grant documentation anyways.
so we just have to work through the mechanics of going through one or the other committee or something.
Correct.
And so the
Right.
sculptures right now go through Park and Recs, right? Just not to interrupt Mr. Livingston,
That's
but
what
just,
the ballerina went through.
yeah.
They specifically do if they're going in a park facility. If they're not going in a park facility, we usually still track them through Parks and Rec, because it's Parks and Rec and Cultural Affairs, so they've been falling into kind of like the arts bucket. But we've only had that donation process happen once at this point, since I've been here. I know there's been other donations in the past, but from what I understand, the process that's now laid out in Parks and Rec and Cultural Affairs through the Parks Department outlines kind of the process, which it goes through that committee and then to full council.
And should we note that in this ordinance? Would that be helpful to make that formalized?
I think we have to.
I
Yeah.
think so, and I think it goes to David's point as well, kind of how we would be able to, where each of these pieces would be able to be located. There's the Parks and Rec, the donation policy that Robert put together that I think we should probably reference that would denote kind of how that process works.
Okay. Our usual guidelines or something like that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I'm feeling that seems necessary here.
Okay. Great.
Yeah,
Josh,
I
you
guess
do have
when
a
I-
hand up and it's your turn.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I had a couple small things, some related to funding, actually most not. The only thing I was wondering about the funding, if it's a grant and the grant is subject to conditions, like where it says under 17A6 and it's A1. Chuck,
Yeah,
it
don't
says
get
the
too
grant-
attached. We just like kind of built the structure. This was
Yeah,
very.
I'm just referencing so people can look at it now. I guess the part of this, if you accept a grant and the grant has certain conditions attached to it, obviously the city or the Arts Commission, whomever is the entity accepting the grant has to abide by those conditions. And that also includes, I would assume that's also true for the private stuff too. If, with the ballerina, if I remember correctly, there were conditions attached to how the ballerina was actually donated to the city. I don't know if guidelines are a better place to put this, but there seems to be a lot of sort of technical language insofar as acceptance of this, compliance with various conditions set by grants and stuff like that, that I just don't see here yet. And I don't know if it needs to be here or it needs to be somewhere else, but I'm worried that since this is passing through now a number of different hands, whether it's a commission, multiple commissions and committees, and I realize administratively it's more consolidated, but I just want to make sure something doesn't get lost and say we don't comply with some grant or something, and now we're in trouble. I just want to, I don't know if what the thought process has been there or not. I just sort of didn't get a sense of that from this draft.
Yeah, I think we could definitely include that in a guidelines type of document. I think that's how we've been operating at this point in time anyways. So if we were to get grant funds, we would follow the process that we have at the city
Nice.
side of how we would normally handle a grant for any other department. So if we wanted to,
If you
reference
want to
that
reference an existing
specifically-
document, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Like if instead of recreating the wheel, if there's something that you find that's a better, and I say this with David, our community services chair on the call here. I mean, if there's a document that spells this out and solves this problem and doesn't require us to spend a whole lot of extra time on this, like, great. If you can embed some sort of a reference or something, because I'm worried about things getting lost. I also was curious, if you don't mind, I want to switch gears from funding for a second. I was curious why in the officers section, it said the mayor shall appoint a chair and a vice chair of the commission.
Yeah,
In most of
That's
these
a good
commissions,
question.
don't they usually select their own chair and vice chair? Why? I don't know if there was a rationale for this decision or not.
So I think the rationale was that we wanted some turnover for the chair. So what's been happening previously is that members were getting reappointed and then we're continuously going to be the chair over and over again. So there was never any real opportunity for new folks to be able to take those positions as they entered the commission. So it would get some more diversity on the commission and be able to kind of reappoint chairs. And maybe, you know, maybe the mayor does end up reappointing, you know, the same person for 2 terms, but we want to try to avoid where it's like a 6-year term with the same person.
I hear
Yeah,
you
I
on
think
the
there's
rationale.
also, I think there's
Oh.
also a second point, Josh, if I may, which is that this commission is in our capital budget and our operating budget, and also will be responsible for administering a number of different grants and different funds for us. And as a result of that, we want to ensure that there is accountability there to the city of Norwalk and accountability to the processes that need to be followed. And so I think that given that complexity, there's sort of like an extra piece of responsibility in which we thought that the mayor should be appointing the chair.
Look, that rationale makes sense to me. The term limits part of this just isn't in here. Unless I
Oh,
missed
yeah,
something.
we didn't build that in, because
Okay.
usually when we put it in, like, we'll have staggered terms for people and things like
That
that.
I-
so that
that I
everybody
saw,
doesn't
but
go-
not
yeah.
for leadership positions. I see the staggered terms for,
Just like
the
noting
amendment.
that we're gonna put it in, yeah.
okay, but that, I understand if well, I think what Jessica, I mean, both Jessica and Serena, but definitely what Jessica said about this isn't your average chairpersonship. That I understand. I guess the term limits thing, I think just if you can work that in there, because I agree with you that it shouldn't be someone just doing it forever. But then that needs to be in here.
Did we add term limits? I don't remember that, Tom. Like, I know we said that the terms were 2 years, but I don't know that we said that you could only serve 2 or 3 terms.
We don't have term limits. We
Per
don't have
se,
term
I
limits
don't-
at all,
yeah.
but we can put.
Yeah,
term
I
limits.
think it was
I'm not-
3-year,
I'm not-
I think
I'm
it
not
was
talking
3-year
about even-
terms.
Oh, yeah, we
I'm
moved
not
it
even
to 3
talking about
years. That's
term
great.
limits for being a member as much as I am about term limits for
For
being the
office.
chair and the vice chair.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, we could put that in.
Because I know that there have been boards in the past where one person has been the chair for a long time and it's been an issue. Or
So
I'm
what do you
sorry.
think, ladies? 2 terms, like you could do it for 2 terms, but not more?
I
I
think
also
that,
just, yeah.
All right.
Sorry, Tom, I thought you were,
No, that was the question. That was the question. I was gonna ask you what you thought, Josh, but Lisa.
oh, I like that. I just want to go back to the definition of cultural district for a second.
Yeah, I think we need
Because-
to hone in on that.
Because here's what I don't, forgive me if I'm saying something incorrectly, but I remember when we first started discussing this, the question was, can we just designate the entire city of Norwalk as a cultural district? And the answer to that was no, we don't think that's really sort of in compliance with the statute, or at least in the spirit of the statute. And therefore, we're going to designate basically a couple primary areas, really like the urban core areas, if I'm not mistaken, as these cultural arts districts. And then, of course, it says it's designated by the Common Council from time to time. But I thought also my understanding was if you just say South Norwalk is a cultural arts district, that's a designation that lasts in perpetuity. That's not something that has a timestamp to it, right?
that's correct, but we can add more districts.
Okay.
So
So,
if you were to say, okay, South Norwalk is the district and then it's
Yeah.
established, we could then go back and say, okay, South Norwalk plus Wall Street is the district now. Or
Right.
East Norwalk or whatever.
We did also try to exercise some liberty on the size of the geography by asking in several creative ways if the city could be identified as the district, and the answer was no to all of those approaches. So pretty adamant on the answer being no, but then the definition of the district needs to be walkable. So I'm not really sure,
okay.
depending on who's walking and how
Okay.
passionate
I was
they are
to
about
say,
walking, it could be many different.
I was just
sizes.
gonna
So-
raise that, because aren't there like some other there was a couple of other things that it has to be, walkable being one of them.
Yeah, and you have to
Right.
have significant cultural assets within the district as well. So obviously, places like the Norwalk Art Space and the Wall Street Theater and the aquarium, those types of things kind of fit in to the Mold and Lockwood Matthews. So that's kind of how the geography gets based. But then if you extend it to the whole city, then you have to have, you know, a walkable area, number one, but number two, all those significant cultural aspects, greater amounts of them essentially.
I guess the thing I guess I'm just thinking about is there are certain areas of the city that are very easy to fit within this definition. Wall Street and South Norwalk clearly being two very easy areas. However, I'm also thinking about Cranberry, which has a number of historical designation, historical sites, art sites, Gallagher Mansion, so on. But of course, it's not, it's not the most walkable area in that it's not an urban area. It's a more suburban area.
It's
If we
exactly
were to
the example we used. Yeah, that was exactly the example we used. We're like, well, what about Gallagher Mansion? That's a really amazing cultural asset. So, yeah.
But I guess when you said that you had asked this question and the answer was no, I assumed that was supplied by a council, by Corp Council.
It's not supplied by Corp Council. It's supplied by the Fairfield County Arts Association, who's working with the state on the state statute. So we've been going back and forth with the state, and basically the state and the department who's administering this and in charge of this, in addition to David Green, who's the executive director of the Fairfield County Arts. I can't remember the name off the top of my head.
Cultural Alliance.
Cultural Alliance. So we've been working with them really closely on a few. There is some ambiguity in different parts of the language in which we've received, and we've gone back and forth numerous times on sort of like, is it 6 members? Are the 6 members representing all 6 of the categories? Is it one person who represents more than one category? And then this definition of the district is also what we've been going back and forth with them on, where it's also new that we're trying to push the envelope a little bit on what we think the definition could be, or what the geography could look like, or how those members fit into the categories. So I think they're giving us answers as we're sort of asking those questions. And I'm not really sure that other municipalities like Ridgefield, let's say, has necessarily dug in and is asking those types of questions, because they seem to be learning like we are as we all go along.
All right, thank you.
David, do you have a final question? Or if anybody else has other things after David?
Yeah, just to speak to what you guys were just talking about, from the day one that this was talked about, and I remember looking at a PowerPoint from the state a couple of years ago, and that the idea being that it's not just about it's not just about the cultural assets within the city itself. It's also about an area that can attract people into the city. So walkability becomes very important, because it's also about the restaurants and the other retail shops that exist within that district that's walkable, that gets people into the city to utilize from a tourism standpoint, and utilizing the cultural assets that we have within that particular area. And I think that's what's important. While Cranberry is an amazing asset of the city, and the mansion and everything create a cultural destination in and of themselves, it doesn't also have those other factors that I think are what the spirit of what this is. I'm still working through the membership idea, because of the nature of what this is, the nature of the grant work that is a part of it, the nature of potentially disbursement of those funds through this commission. My question becomes, is that we have the expertise on that commission that is capable of handling that. And we have amazing people that live in Norwalk, and amazing artists that live in Norwalk, and people who are involved in arts and culture within Norwalk. But we also have some pretty amazing people that don't live here yet come here and work here on a daily basis and bring that culture to life within our city. And I think that we need to embrace that as well, because those people have, I think, should be a part of this, as well as people who are resident electors within the city. And I just think we have to figure, the membership is still sketchy for me on the way it's written right now. I know it's gone through a number of iterations, and I think that we're in a place. I just want to make sure that we're not losing that potential expertise that can bring that level to the city as well. That's my point.
So just to fill you in on that a little bit. So we played with the number and we came up with 9 because you have to have 3/4, I think it was, right, Jessica and Sabrina, of the people having a certain type of background and things like that. So, and I think that the mayor's office felt pretty strongly that we should have only voting members from Norwalk, but we did add, I believe it's 3 members from the cultural community. So hoping that.
Well, I saw that, and I also saw that there's the a few ex officio.
That's the ex officios, yeah.
The ex officio, you still want to attract somebody who sits on a commission who has, I think, some weight, especially a commission that's going to be able to go out to find money and also accept the money into the city and do that work with it. And so it's just something that I don't think is fully fleshed out yet. That was my only point. I think it's in great shape. I think it's the framework is there. I think it just needs to be tweaked. So
yeah, it's totally skeleton. So yeah, give us some more thoughts about that. Everybody think about how that might work. We aren't going to vote this anywhere. We're going to give you another draft next month because we just wanted to vet it, get everybody's sense, especially about the account. That felt like there had to be a lot more talk about how the monies are going to come in and how what the account's going to look like. Any other thoughts before we conclude this conversation? Looks like we're done. So the next thing we're going to move towards is the discuss and vote Chapter 73, Article 1, Oak Hills Park Authority. And Mr. Livingston, I'm going to turn to you on this one. It's a pretty simple lift. And then also, Brian, we're going to want you to share your opinion because I think that Mr. Camacho last meeting had a concern about that.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. So the point of this proposed amendment was to add the Director of Recreation and Parks to the Oak Hills Authority. The reason being, of course, that we thought that the person who was most responsible for parkland in the city should have some sort of visibility and at least a limited say in what goes on at one of our biggest parks. So that was the basic reason behind this. Mr. Camacho had raised the issue about whether this was legal. Brian can weigh in on that now, because I think that was the one issue that was out there. Oh, by the way, before I do that, the other thing this did was I just point out again, a very minor thing was to get rid of the newspaper publication requirement for their notice of their hearing. Just to make it simple while we're there, I figured why not fix that? But anyway, go ahead.
And it causes expenses to go down too, which is good.
Yeah, so the law department took a look at the issue after the last meeting, and it was the law department's opinion that the state statutes regarding public recreational facility authorities would not prohibit the Director of Parks and Recreation from serving as a member of the Oak Hills Park Authority. So that was the opinion that was given after the last meeting.
Are you satisfied, Mr. Camacho? Great. So what I'd like to do is vote to take this to public hearing at our next ordinance committee meeting. So is there a motion, Mr. Livingston?
I'll make the motion, but I do want to just get rid of the brackets on the fourth line for their designee. I think we talked about that last time, but just take that out. Then with that change, I would propose to move this to the public hearing at the next meeting of this committee in April.
All good on that, Brian, making that change?
Yeah, I removed the brackets from the fourth line of 73-2A. It's the fourth line, removed the brackets surrounding or their designee.
Gotcha. Oh, there it is. I see it too on my phone. Okay, all in favor of Mr. Livingston's motion to move it to public hearing? That would be 5-0. All right, that's moved along. Okay, new business. Our last item is discuss Chapter 66 of the Norwalk Code, mooring and anchoring, 23 mooring and fee schedule. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Callahan, who has been kind enough to join us to give us a quick once over on this one.
Sure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. The Harbor Management Commission revised their mooring fee structure back in the summer of 2022, applicable to the 2023 calendar year. The process for revising mooring fee schedules or structure appears in 66A-9A of our ordinances. And more generally, the rules and regulations are in 66A of the code. It goes from 1 through 28, separated by 2 articles. We've had an opportunity to research Chapter 66A rather recently. And, based on that review, we were left with the following impression. A, the process for revising fee structures for moorings is really antiquated. This ordinance was passed 3 decades ago. We have a myriad of ordinances that have passed since then that deal with user fees. I use the term loosely. As a procedural matter, they really don't mirror what we're currently doing with our ordinances. And I can give examples of that if you like, but I think they're probably pretty obvious. And so I think it makes sense, or I think it makes sense to at least come to the committee and suggest that we put a hold, or you consider putting a hold on future changes to fee schedules, in light of what I just mentioned, until there's an opportunity for the community to kind of take a little bit of deeper dive into 66A and its structure, and how it could be updated and modified to be brought current and relevant, 3 decades later. So again, the concept here was to simply introduce and provide a basic framing for what the concern was out of the law department, as to process really, and then with the focal point being 66A-9A, which is the mooring fees. But that's not to suggest that a more global look at 66A wouldn't be warranted at the same time. I have a few things to add here. I mean, this is updating this to require a little additional process. It's certainly not complicated. It certainly wouldn't take long to work out. It's really a light lift for this committee, considering all the types of work this committee does. It's probably about the lightest lift you've seen in a while. So it should be easy to do, but I think it warrants some consideration at this point. And so I think that we have other ordinances, as I mentioned earlier, that are good leaving off points. I mean, you could just pick any umpteenth number of them by just typing in terms like public hearing and publication as search terms in our our code section on our website. So that's it. I mean, really kind of short and sweet. I don't really have a lot of comments here. I just want to get the issue before the committee to decide how to take it up.
Great. Thank you so much, Darren. Does anybody have any things that they want to share? Mr. Livingston?
Thank you. So coincidentally, with the law department and Justice Department looking at this, I had been approached by a number of the local yacht clubs with concerns about this ordinance. If you spend any time with it, you'll see that it's really a set of regulations that were, for one reason or another, were codified, so to speak, but they're very confusing to people out there, particularly when you get in, as Darren suggested, the fees, how the fees are set. And I think it really does warrant, I don't think it's a significant revision, as I agree with Darren on this, but it may be a change in sort of approach, in that these are, a lot of these are regulations, but the most important thing, and I think as Darren touched on, is we have to make it clear to the public how the regulation, I mean, how the fees are established and get more public input. So I fully support moving ahead with this and making the necessary changes.
And Darren, we're going to have to work a little bit with the Harbor Commission, right? To work with them about maybe even making an amendment to their plan in order to adopt what we think needs to be a more transparent process.
Yeah. So the controlling, the short answer is yes. The controlling statute or the enabling act is in 22A-113S of the Connecticut General Statutes. And in broad brush, it basically says that the Harbor Commission can propose mooring fees, mooring and anchorage fees, and any other fees in its harbor management plan to be approved by the Common Council. So ultimately, they propose, the council decides. The way I interpret it is that, you know, technically the mooring fees wouldn't have to actually be part of the harbor management plan, but other categories of fees would certainly have to be set forth in the harbor management plan. And the method for modifying a harbor management plan is codified in the Harbor Management Commission statute, which again is a 22A-113. I think it means A, and it ends shortly after S. It provides mechanically how that's done. It requires approval by the state. I don't think it's a difficult process, but it's an additional layer than what would be needed to say just modify the mooring fees themselves. So
good. So we'll work with you and maybe have a meeting with the Harbor Commission and kind of get this process underway.
yeah, that sounds great.
Good. So the committee's alerted. Did anybody else have any questions for Darren or Tom from what he heard from the? Good. Okay. So that's all.
Lisa, I just had one question. Are we just looking at working on 66A9? Or are we talking about working on the whole of 66A?
The whole
I think
thing.
we're gonna have to take a look at it in more detail.
Okay.
I think that there's some messy things in there, like as those of you who've worked with Tom and me before, we hate putting fees in ordinances, so cleaning things out, like we would suggest that we look at fees outside on a,
Well, yeah, because it's 66A26 is the
Yeah.
fees, right?
there's fees listed. We never do that. We
Yeah.
always refer to a fee schedule, things like that. So we need
Yeah.
to clean it up for this, as Darren said, I think that this is over 30 years old and doesn't really conform to the way we like to write ordinances now.
Yeah. No.
I
Great,
think
thank you.
I think in the language itself even refers to itself as a regulation, not an ordinance. So it
It does.
It does. It does. Rules and regulations.
It's kind of a mess.
Oddly
Tom
placed.
Livingston obviously was not writing ordinances in 1992 is all I can say.
Fine.
I've seen Tom Livingston's ordinances. It wasn't one of his.
Mhm.
All right. Well, Darren, thank you so much. Darren, also your hands.
Thank you, Darren.
Too. You were not with us then. So appreciate everybody's help. I will.
Thank you, Jessica and Sabrina and Todd
Yeah.
Bryant, and obviously
Yeah,
Darren as
thank
well.
you.
The whole team and I'll
And
definitely,
for Dana for popping on as well.
yeah.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Anybody want to give a motion to adjourn? We don't have Diana. Thank you,
Hmm.
Mr. Goldstein. All right, we're set. Thank you, everybody.
Night.
Eight
Good night,
everybody.
Good night.
night.
Good. Thank
Bye.
you.